Hi everyone, I'm Jesse from Rive. Today we're going to see how to create a menu with different options using list and data binding. The idea is to create a simple menu button and a submenu button and then reuse them to build a more complex menu. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is create a simple menu button. To do this, I'm going to create an ad board and remove the background. I'm going to add a text and I'm going to change the scale to 40 and I'm going to use a thin font. Now I'm going to wrap this text in a layout and remove the absolute option. Okay, I'm going to wrap it in a new layout and make sure that it's filled and centered. In this layout, I'm going to add a padding of 40 pixels for the horizontal and 20 pixels for the vertical, and a dark gray color for the background. The last thing I'm going to do is to change the ad board as a hug. This way, the size of the button depends on the text. Okay, now I'm going to name this ad board menu button. And as you can see here, we already have a view model assigned to this ad board. Here. I'm going to name it menu buttons as well. Now I'm going to add a string property to be able to edit the text. I'm going to call it menu text. And now that I have this property, I'm going to bind the text by selecting the run, data bind, menu text. In the view model, I'm going to select the string property and change the value to menu. Now, if I play this machine, you can see that the text says menu. Now, I'm going to work with interaction. For this, I'm going to create a couple of animations, changing the background and the text color. So, this animation can be the idle, and here I'm going to keep the background and the text color. Now I'm going to add a new animation, hover, and in this animation, the background changes to orange, something like this, and the text changes to black. Okay, now in the Steam machine, I'm going to drag this new animation and connect it to the idle with a transition in both directions. For the condition, what I'm going to do is add a new property in the vModel, a boolean. I'm going to call it isHover. And now I'm going to select both transitions and add isHover property from the menu button. And to go to hover, this property is true, and to go to idle is false. Another thing I'm going to do is add a listener. using this layout, which covers the entire button. On pointer enter, set is hover to true. And another listener with pointer exit is hover is false. Now, if I play the machine, you can see how the button changes on hover. Okay, now I'm going to create the submenu button. And since it will be very similar to this one, what I'm going to do is duplicate this board. I'm going to name it a submenu button. And also I'm going to duplicate the view model. Here I'm going to remove this number and change this to submenu text. Now I have to update the band properties of this board. So in the text, here I need to update the banding using submenu text property. And the same for the conditions. In this case, it's hover from submenu button. And the listener. And make sure that the board has the correct view model. To finish configuring this submenu, I'm going to change some things. The text size can be 16. Here in this layout, the horizontal padding can be 10 and the vertical 4. I'm going to change the alignment to the center left, and I'm going to change the horizontal of the board to fill. This way, the submenu will be automatically adapted to the menu layout. Okay, in the view model, I'm going to change the value to a submenu. And as you can see, it's already working. Okay, another thing I'm going to do is a separator to group some of these submenus. For this, I'm going to create another artboard and remove the background. I'm going to name it separator. Now I'm going to add a layout. Remove the background. And in this layout, I'm going to add two childs in a row. And remove the background as well. Okay, this first layout will have the text to be able to name the group. And this other will have the separator line. So here, I'm going to add a text, in this case 10, light. I'm going to move it here and change the layout to hard. For the line, what I'm going to do is use another layout. Remove the background, add a stroke, white color, 0.5. And change the vertical to fixed 0 pixels. So now it's aligned. In the parent layout, I'm going to change the alignment to the center. And in the main layout, I'm going to add a padding of 10 pixels for the horizontal and a gap of 8 pixels to separate the text from the line. And to finish, change that border to fill and hug, like the submenu. Now I'm going to create a view model for the separator. Add it to that board. And here I'm going to add a string property to be able to edit the text. Run, data bind, separator text. And in the view model, I'm going to change the value to separator. Okay, so we already have the menu button, the submenu button, and the separator. The idea now is to add to this menu button the different submenus and separators. But for this, I need to create the different instances that I'm going to use for this menu. So I'm going to start with the separator. What I'm going to do is select the view model and create two instances. First, I'm going to rename this one, add two more, and remove the first one. Instance 1 will have the value separator 1, and instance 2, the separator 2. Now let's create the instances for the submenu. I'm going to rename this one, and add 10 instances, and remove this one. Now I want to modify the value of each of them. Okay, now the instances for the menu button. In this case, I'm going to create 3. Okay, we already have all the instances we need. Now the idea is to add them to this menu button. And for this, I'm going to use a list at board. But first, I'm going to change a few things here. Okay, I'm going to rename this layout menu button. Now I'm going to wrap it in another one, change to fill, and because the submenu will be below to the menu, I'm going to change the layout to a column. Now I'm going to add a child layout here. This is where I'm going to add the submenu and separator. I'm going to call it list. And I'm going to add the board list. Now I'm going to change this layout to column 2, so the submenu appears vertically. Add a padding of 10 pixels and a gap of 4 pixels for the different items in the list. I'm going to change the color of the background, black, and change the vertical to hug, so the vertical depends of the content. For the add board list, I need a property. So in the menu button, view model, I'm going to add a list property. I'm going to name it submenu list. And I'm going to add it to the add board list. Okay, now what I'm going to do is add the submenu and separator instances for each menu button instance. For example, in the menu button 1 instance, I'm going to add from the submenu button the instances 1, 2, and 3. From separator instance 1, and from submenu button instances 4 and 5. For the menu button 2 instance, I'm going to add from submenu instance 6 and 7. And for the menu button 3 instance, I'm going to add from submenu instances 8, 9, separator 2, and submenu 10. Now, if I select that board and change the view model instance, you can see each group of submenus. Okay, now in a new add board, I'm going to add these menu buttons. I'm going to call it main and change the background color. Something like this. And also I'm going to create a view model and add it to that board. To add the different menu buttons, I'm going to use another list. So I'm going to create a layout, remove the background, and add that board list. In this layout, I'm going to add a padding of 50 pixels and a gap of 20 pixels for the horizontal. Make sure this layout is in a row, and I'm going to align to the top center. In the view model, I'm going to add a list property, menu list, and I'm going to add it to the board list. Now, in the list property, I'm going to add the different menu button instances. Menu button 1, menu button 2, and menu button 3. If I play the machine, you can see the 3 menu buttons with the different submenus and separators. Okay, to finish, I'm going to create the interactions so when I click on each of these menu buttons, the submenu appears. For this, I have to do some things. First, I'm going to create the appears and disappears animations for the submenu. For that, in the menu button at board, I'm going to use the layout that contains the list. So I'm going to create an animation. And here I'm going to key the vertical in height and the vertical padding. In a new animation, when the submenu disappears, I'm going to change this to fixed 0 pixels and 0 for the vertical padding. One thing I need to do here is, because I'm animating how the layout collapses, I'm going to check the clipping option to make sure that the content disappears when the layout vertical is 0. Okay, now in the Steam Machine, in another layer, I'm going to add the not visible animation and connect to the entry. Then the visible animation and connect to the not visible with a transition in both directions. To add the condition here, I need to do one thing first. Here in the menu button View Model, I'm going to add a leaks index to identify each of these menu buttons in the main app board. And also I'm going to add a number property in the main view model. I'm going to call it ID to compare it with the leaks index. So now, for this transition, I'm going to add a condition that is, if the leaks index is equal to ID, the submenu is visible. And if the leaks index is different to the ID, then the submenu is not visible. Now I only need to set the ID property equal to the leaks index when I click on each of these menu buttons. So for that, I'm going to add a listener, selecting the layout that covers the menu button, on pointer down, set ID to the leaks index. Now you can see how the submenu appears and disappears each time I click on each of these menu buttons. But one thing that happens now is that every time I play the Steam Machine, the first menu button is always visible. This is because the leaks index for this item is 0, and the ID property value is also 0. The solution is to change the ID, here in the vModel, to something like this, -1. Now, if I play the machine, because the ID is -1, there is no submenu until I click on one of these menu buttons. Okay, the last thing, and to make this a bit more interesting, I'm going to add a duration and interpolation to the submenu. Here, in the menu button at board, in this transition, I'm going to add a duration of 500 milliseconds with an elastic interpolation. Something like this. And for this one, a shorter duration, so it disappears faster, around 100 milliseconds, and a simple interpolation. And that's it. Now it's more fun. Remember that if you want to export this, you need to mark each of these at board as a component.